Close of the day. The Honourable Member for Hobart.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, there's been a heck of a lot said about this budget by a lot of different people around this room. I guess my summation of this budget is it was never going to be easy, and I think everyone would agree with that. We certainly aren't in very good shape. I want to start out by commenting on the bushfires. That the money that's been set aside for that, I think, is just so absolutely essential. My hometown was indeed Dunalley, and I was down there during the fires, and the strength and the resilience of that community and the way they responded within 2 days of setting up clothing stores and people to be able to come along and get toiletries and bedding and all of those sorts of things was just absolutely amazing. It was done by the community themselves in the first instance, and indeed following on from that, obviously the other services came into to play. It had a really positive effect on the community. It increased community cohesion. We had neighbours assisting neighbours, probably neighbours that may have had a little bit of contention with each other over the years, coming together and helping each other out. And I think from that perspective it was it's been positive in that sense, but of course a heck of a long way to go, and a lot of work to be done to see that community rise again. On my estimation, over 40% of the houses in that town were burnt. And if you go, and I counted them, I went round and I counted the houses that were burnt, the ones that I could get to, and also compared that with those that were left standing, and it's about 40% to my mind in the Dunalley area. Excuse me. And it's just when you think of that, and you think of the effect and impact it has on a community, to see that level of infrastructure just disappear, you would think, well, that's enough to break any community, but it hasn't. I think particularly of Bill Kidd, who's the hotel operator on the top of the hill there at Dunalley. He suffered personal loss. He lost a house just across from the hotel, but there he was, working very, very consistently and diligently with the authorities to see a proper set of services set up in the paddock behind his hotel, and he really does deserve acknowledgement, as do a lot of other people that indeed helped to make sure that the services were provided to the level that was necessary under those circumstances. You take one person, a fellow who's lived in the area for many years. He lost his family home, where he was brought up as a child. He lost a home that he'd moved into that was previously owned by his family many years prior to him being born. And he moved to Copping, and indeed on that same day he lost that house as well. So he lost that house, he lost his original homestead, if you like, and he lost another house that he used to live in. His connections with that town, you would think he'd be absolutely depressed by that. But no, he said, I've still got one left. And I said, well, what's that? He said, it's the pub. He said we did actually run the pub for a while. He said, my family. So he's got spirit, he's got connection, and I just want to acknowledge the level of commitment that community has to see itself rise up again. We know about Ike Kelly and as a sawmiller down there, lost probably somewhere in the vicinity of $15 million. I mean, it's unbelievable, and many, a number around this chamber have been down there to have a look at that. So it will take many years to recover, and indeed it will be a significant cost. So I think there are important allocations to make in this budget. The businesses that employed people down there, some as little as 5, others up to 15. There's one that was impacted. I think they lost upwards of $2 million worth of stock. One of the fish farmers there, and also one of the processing facilities, Cray Factory, lost very significant amounts in the stock during that fire. We've got to acknowledge their hardship, and we've got to make sure that the government does what it can to actually alleviate some of that pain, and so I commend the government for making those commitments. As a state, of course, we've got to create opportunities and take opportunities as they present themselves, and I think that's important when we're in the situation as we are. I look at the opportunities that could be there for, say, for instance, growing hemp, and I've mentioned it before in this house, an extra rotational crop, greater fibre content than eucalypts, very diverse usage. You can make clothing out of it, you can make food oil out of it. I've talked about the fibre. There's also the biofuel, and I was talking with the Honourable Member for Elwick about this the other day, and as to whether or not that does in fact increase greenhouse emissions, and she's telling me what she has seen in Europe, that may not be the case. So I look forward to seeing some further information in that regard. I wasn't that long ago that we had an article in the Mercury by, it was May the 12th in fact, by Mr Lynn Cox, and he is chair of the Tasmanian Development Board, and I just want to read a couple of paras from that particular article. And Lynn is a person who is the chairman of the board. He was a partner in professional services firm Deloitte, including more than 10 years as managing partner of Tasmania for that company. He has extensive business experience from his 40 years in practice in the areas of change management, assurance, risk management, and listing companies on the stock exchange. He's chairman of Tasmanian Financial Institution B&E Limited and a member of General Council of Tasmania's Health Organisation South. So he has quite a lot of experience, and he was mentioning some of the opportunities that we have here in this state, and he goes on, I'll quote from the article, salmonid aquaculture is a growing industry in the state that makes a substantial contribution to our gross state product and is a significant employer. TasSal commenced an $8 million project with Huon Aquaculture, supported by $3.92 million of federal funding from the Tasmanian Forests Intergovernmental Agreement. This will see freshwater dam and underwater pipe infrastructure put in place near Dover to allow freshwater bathing that improves fish health and reduces environmental impacts. Agriculture is another priority sector, and a grant of $250,000 was recently provided to Hanson Orchards to upgrade its processing capacity in the Huon Valley, as well as provide bulk distribution of Tasmanian apples nationwide to major supermarket chains. A key focus in the northwest is the growing dairy industry, where significantly increased production has the potential to offset many of the job losses in the forestry sector, with hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects planned or underway. In the northeast, former forest workers are now working with Hazel Brothers and Hayward Steel Fabrication and Construction on the $400 million Muscle Row wind farm project. In the south, a $13 million loan to Norske Skog was given in support of their $84 million project to diversify production at their Boyer mill, and will secure 330 direct jobs, 900 indirect jobs, and create a further 100 jobs in the construction phase. He goes on to mention a number of other things. He says, I know from talking to Friends Interstate that Mona is a key driver of southern Tasmania's increased profile, and was a major factor in Hobart's recent listing in Lonely Planet's top 10 places to visit in 2013. The board administers the $30 million renewable energy loan scheme and approved proposals that are being implemented. Loan applications received for assistance include power generation proposals from solar, wind, mini hydro. The board approved assistance to a number of renewable energy projects, including a wind power generation plant on Flinders Island, a wind turbine at Sisters Creek, and solar panels in Launceston. And again, he goes on further and says a vital piece of Tasmanian infrastructure is Sense-T, a $42 million partnership between the University of Tasmania, the Tasmanian Government, CSIRO and IBM. It is also funded by the Australian Government. Sense-T establishes Tasmania as a centre for technology and research excellence that drives new approaches to social, environmental and economic sustainability. Like most southerners, I often stroll along Hobart's waterfront and see the results of the support the board has provided to the Antarctic and science research sector, which employs more than 3,200 highly qualified staff, and is worth $500 million per year. Now, I quote those from that article because, yes, there is, there are things that we can think of negatively about Tasmania, but the fact is that there are a lot of things that we can be very positive about. And I think we must be careful that we don't become a catalyst for a declining economy by talking it down. I think we need to talk it up. We've seen those sorts of things happening, as mentioned there by Lynn Cox, and I think it's important to acknowledge that we do have opportunities in this state. Yes, we are in a bad spot, and yes, there are probably reasons why that is the case, and that there could have been better other things done at different times to actually improve the situation. But we must concentrate on going forward. I really do think we need to do that. As a state, as I said before, we've got to create opportunities and take the opportunities as they present themselves. Excuse me. So there we see agriculture, burgeoning viticulture. You didn't mention that, but there's a heck of a lot of viticulture going on, and it's going on right around the state. Possibly not on the west coast, but it's happening in two of the other regions. And obviously the opportunities are backed up by the irrigation projects. I mean, getting water there is a big thing, and then it's up to the businesses that can avail themselves of that water to actually make the most of that. So I do think that there's some great things awaiting us in that area. Fishing, aquaculture, shipbuilding. We see the evidence of the shipbuilding that's happening, quite often reported in the press. The Southern Ocean and Antarctic research, the medical research. Let's write off Menzies Centre. There's a lot happening there. And of course, there is a need to continually review the service provision that the government actually provides. And if you look at it, $5 billion in 2013-14, that is a very, very significant amount of money. It is something that we have to always be aware of. It's a very sizable chunk of the state's budget, the actual service provision component. And I think that we need to make sure that that when we're dealing with staffing of different departments and the like, that we don't actually cut them to the point where they actually become, that their morale sinks to such a low point that it all ends up falling apart. I think we've got to be careful of that. People are under quite a significant amount of stress, and I know this myself from being within the Department of Health over the years, and people were continually going and leaving the job to a reducing number of people all the time. And the public service has always been the butt of jokes. A public servant has always been the butt of jokes over the years. And I've got to tell you, it's a very different public service today to what it has been many years ago. People are under stress. They go back at weekends to try and relieve the stress because they can get some of that work done, so that when they go back to work on Monday morning, it's not quite so stressful for them. I mean, you've got people doing that, and they're doing it, and a lot of them are managers, and they're doing it. They're not getting extra money for doing that. They simply want to take the stress off themselves. So I think we've got to be careful how we deal with that.
The other thing too is those, and you've got this balance here, those people actually are getting paid to spend money.
Well, that's exactly right. And of course, if you do go reducing public service numbers, it's exactly right. That's less money that's actually going into the local economy. Now, of course, there is that balance. There is a balance. But we're told in this budget that the annual growth in expenditure has been checked from 8.8% down to 1.8%. That's a heck of a drop over the past two budgets, and that for this year it's going to be, and the three following years, it's going to average out at about 1.9%. I guess, to my mind, diversification is so important, along with continuing innovation in the light of our situation, because I think if you can innovate, you can use technology to the best for the best opportunity to actually reduce the, to increase productivity internally within government departments. I think that's important. I think we have to make sure that IT plays its part. It's always the case, and it's the case in industry. You know, mechanisation is what actually loses jobs. But what we can do in a situation where we've got a really tight situation in terms of public service service delivery, then the way we can actually improve that is to increase the use of technology. And of course, we've got a one-off opportunity here with the NBN. Here we are, the first state to implement the NBN. We need to make sure that we grasp that opportunity. I notice in this budget that the government has actually put a bit aside for actually developing product that can run across the NBN. And that is so important, because if we can get, if we can be the leader with some of those products, then we're actually gaining as a state. We've got an opportunity then to market a product that might be able to be used elsewhere as the NBN gets rolled out. It's important for us to take those opportunities. You know, we've faced a GFC, we've got high Australian dollar, very difficult freighting circumstances, reductions in the GST by another 100 million over the next 4 years. But you know, and so we've just got to be smarter. We've got to work at this in a smarter way and make sure that we capitalise on the opportunities that we've got before us, and I think the NBN is one of those opportunities. And the THOs, we look at the health budget and we think, wow, that's a significant amount of money. Well, I'll be very interested to see how we can find out the real effect of putting in 3 Tasmanian health organisations over and above, instead of having one. The duplications that must be there must be costing us, and I'll be very interested in during the estimates or possibly some other process after the estimates is out of the way. There might be another way of being able to fully examine the effectiveness of those 3 THRs, because quite honestly it's going backwards. Here we are, we've got Aurora and Transend merging, and it's going to save $12 million per annum, I believe. Now if that happens, then why are we going the other way with our health organisations? It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. The year 11 and 12 in each high school, I actually queried that. I remain to be convinced that in fact it is going to work when you consider the economies of scale that the colleges in the cities provide around the state.
It's a real issue for the regional areas, even more than the cities.
No, well, the regional areas, I can understand that in years 11 and 12 in regional high schools needing that.
No, I would disagree.
You don't think so?
I disagree. Mr. President, it actually undermines the college structure, and it means that how do you spread your resources too thin potentially? Well,
I know that. Well, my whole reason it's the economies of scale thing, but you've got to also understand that you're taking people out of their normal environment and pulling them off into a city. I suppose I'm a person that's been there, done that. As a young fellow, I ended up going to high school and college in town, and it had an impact leaving home at the age of 11 to do that. But look, I remain to be convinced that taking the college system out is good, but I do have some sympathy for the regional 11 and 12. But that's a good point to have a debate on, I think.
The risk is that you can't provide the same range of services with a smaller regional high school because you just have no student numbers, and resourcing the teachers and the cost of providing the teachers, that's the real challenge.
Well, I guess the other problem is the breadth of subject. Yeah. No, I understand some of that. Yeah, it might be able to be worked, but look, it's an area that needs to be really carefully thought out, because otherwise we're going to get ourselves into a situation where here once again we're devolving and it may not be producing the result. As I say, the 3 THOs, I really do question that. In the light of the fact that here we are bringing Aurora and Transend back together again. It just seems to me to be a bit odd. I know, Aurora's, yeah, but you know what I'm trying to say. Well, they are, the components of it are going back. But it's just not the retail side. The first home owners grant, well, I've already had a bit of a conversation across the floor with regard to that being abolished. I query that. I wonder about the impact of that when you're putting it into new homes and the quantum of houses available. But the honourable member for Huon tells me that the statistics show the opposite, so I'll be interested to have a closer look at that. I see the government intends to spend $1.4 billion on infrastructure over 4 years, and now again, the type of infrastructure that might be spending, it might be making those commitments to. One thing you've got to be really careful about is that every time you create infrastructure, you're actually creating a maintenance demand, and that is a recurrent expenditure, and that is something that then needs to be found in the following year. And so, unless that infrastructure is actually supporting an income, increase in revenue, then I think you have to be careful how you go about that. And otherwise, you might simply be loading up the budget again with more and more dollars needed for maintenance. So I just think that's something that happened in local government a lot. And everyone was keen to get the new projects off the ground, but of course when it came to the following budgets, we've got another maintenance budget to think about for that particular infrastructure we built last year, and it's just got to keep that in mind, I think, when we see budgets being constructed. The jobs package is expected to create around about 3,000 jobs, but my question there is, are they long-term jobs? Is it possible that there might be more attention placed on existing businesses? I mean, I know that they're putting some money into quite a significant number of small businesses, but got to ask yourself the question as to exactly which jobs, the placement of money where it's going to provide the most long-term sustainable jobs. That's important. We see $2.5 million being applied through the Tasmanian Government Innovation and Investment Fund, and I've already talked about utilising the NBN. I'm not sure whether the forestry agreement money, that must come on top of that, I guess. That's a question that I need to answer for myself, I guess, during estimates. The payroll tax threshold's been raised to $1.25 million from $1 million, and apparently that's the best of any state, so I'm told. So, that's going to provide relief for 2,250 businesses, I'm told, and hopefully that'll help stimulate activity as well. $6 million for the App Railway. Well, hopefully for the new operator we'll see a maintenance component in the lease cost, because otherwise we'll be back in exactly the same situation, 10 or 15 years down the track. So I would hope that the government has made provision for that in their lease, so that indeed it becomes more sustainable. An additional $1 million targeted for evidence-based preventive health measures. Well, obviously the preventive health, the committee that's been set up for that will be interested to learn about that. $83 million for improvement of educational outcomes. Well, I'll be interested to examine how the government intends to allocate these funds. So obviously Gonski must be in there, because it's been stated by the Premier that that's the desire. But I think it's important that we're adding educational opportunities, and I note in the budget there's the Theatre Royal Performing Arts and Education Centre. Well, that's going to be very positive, because it means that it's going to save exits to the mainland institutions for those that are wishing to study in that sphere. And it creates long-term jobs, not jobs that are just there for a construction period, perhaps. But no, it's going to increase cultural capital. I think they're all positive things. I note that the government are going to help businesses and the community transition to a digital economy, but importantly, development of the NBN capable applications, services and technologies, which is what I mentioned before. And that's going to help prepare a workforce for jobs that haven't even been thought of yet, I'd have to say. We've always got to keep that in mind, that we don't constrain ourselves with what we know today in terms of the work environment, because it changes constantly, especially in technology it changes. So it's important that this focus on digital economy is indeed provided. And we need to take advantage of that NBN opportunity. It's a one-off opportunity which we've got a competitive edge there. I note that community corrections, that there's $1.4 million in 2013-14. That's apparently for a staffing program expansion to reduce drink driving, family violence, sexual offending and substance abuse. One thing I asked there is how much attention is being paid on about the transitioning of inmates coming to the end of their sentence back into the workaday world. If that's done properly and effectively, that can reduce recidivism, and it can also help raise self-esteem, and that means that you have less people in your prisons, which means that the cost of running community corrections is down. So I think we ought to be making sure that we're providing effectively for those sorts of programs. Then, of course, there's the $33 million forestry and the Tasmanian Forest Agreement implementation, and the $220 million which the federal government's putting in. Well, hopefully we can see the money being used to best advantage, and hopefully it'll be managed properly, because we know that in the past some of that hasn't been managed properly or effectively, and I think it's important that we can be assured it is going to be managed and managed well. And I say that because the rest of Australia is watching, and they're watching very carefully. They won't continue to want to see Tasmania receiving this money and it not being a positive outcome as a result. Now, just to finish, I received an email from the Salvation Army from Stuart Foster, and I just want to read the email, because I think it's important to help us understand the other side, the social aspects of our Tasmanian community, those that are less fortunate. Dear Rob, you may be interested in this report released by the Salvation Army nationally today, and it has some very worrying indications on how people accessing our services across Australia are feeling and experiencing poverty. I've attached it for your information. Some of the key stats from the report include, now this is Australia-wide, and their clients. 54% of respondents indicated that they are worse off this year than last year. 51% have gone without meals, often in favour of their children. 37% are missing out on school activities. 12% rise in the number of people coming to us who are on New Start, and 28% can't afford a substantial meal each day. And some of the Tasmanian statistics out of this report. He says we have some Tasmanian specific stats that are interesting in relation to our Doorways program and emergency relief. 11 Doorways centres statewide. Our average client numbers are between 700 and 800 per month. That's about 170 a week. 170 people a week are accessing one service provider in the Salvation Army. Now, how many service providers do we have? 35% of people over the last 12 months are new clients, 47% sole parents with children, 4% under 18, and 12% are homeless. That is primary, secondary and tertiary homelessness. Of particular concern is the single parents transferring to New Start. This report highlights the issues relating to their reduced capacity to provide for their families' basic and developmental needs and in accessing the job market. So we mustn't forget that we govern here for all of Tasmania, that the budget needs to be aware, when striking the budget, the government needs to be aware of those sorts of statistics. And what we need to be doing is, as you pointed out, Mr President, during your campaign, that jobs are very important for this state. But we must make sure that we get the right types of jobs, and indeed that we are able to see ourselves move positively into the future, rather than just continually bringing to the attention of the public the negative aspects. I think it's important that we do understand that this state has a lot of advantages, and I think it's something that we need to focus on into the future. So thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Launceston.
Mr President, through you, I was wondering if the Honourable Member would be so gracious as to move that the